With pandemic restrictions easing, the economy in the US is booming again. For many small business owners, that means they need money to support all this newfound demand. At the same time, other business owners still struggling from the pandemic recently lost an important lifeline, the Paycheck Protection Program, which expired at the end of May. I'm Donna Fuscaldo, a senior finance writer for business.com. Today, we're chatting with Libby Morris, VP of Operations at Funding Circle, the online lender, about the loan options available to small businesses, whether it's growing or needs help now that PPP is over. Hi, Libby. Thanks so much for taking out the time today.
Hi, Donna. It's nice to see you again.
So PPP is over, which was a huge lifeline for small business owners. At the same time, the economy is improving. Demand is there again. Business owners are scrambling to hire people, get the equipment necessary. What do they do? What are their options out there? Is there money to be borrowed, or what's going on? What's set the stage for us?
Yeah, I think there definitely is. There are a lot of opportunities. If you think about like the personal lending world, there's mortgages, there's credit cards, there's lines of credit. There's almost always a comparable product in the small business world. So I think there are people out there. We see that there are people out there lending. Funding Circle, where I work, is lending. And so I think there are options out there for borrowers who are ready to start asking again for loans.
Now, has the pandemic changed it? Is it harder to get a loan, easier? Do lenders look at different criteria now that the pandemic is kind of ending?
Well, in the small business lending world and in the online lending world, like what we do, we've always looked at slightly different criteria, partly because in the olden days, you'd go to your bank and you'd shake your banker's hand. And so that's how they knew who you were. We obviously can't do that because it's all online. So we've always used alternative ways to figure out if someone is who they say they are and if they're associated to the business. I think we'll continue to do that. But I do think that the kind of old school big three are going to be even more important coming out of the pandemic. And those are cash flow, credit, and character. So cash flow is like, what do your bank accounts look like? Are you overdrawing a lot? That can really hurt your approval rate. Credit is obviously not only your business's credit, but your personal credit. And then characters, can we establish that your business exists and that you own it? So things you can do for that are like filing your Secretary of State wherever you live, having a really good business website. Those things are going to continue to matter.
Does funding take long now, or is it still pretty quick?
Well, it's still quite quick, I think. Obviously, that really is determined by your product. If you think about like a line, on one side is price and one side is speed, usually you're trying to find the happy medium for yourself somewhere in between. As you get faster, sometimes you'll see the price will be a bit higher because usually what makes it faster is automation, less documentation. And so that means that the lender's taking a little bit more risk. If you're not in a rush, it might make sense to take your time and apply for something like an SBA loan that can take several months, but often can be quite good on price. So that really depends on the borrower, where they are in their kind of credit journey. We had a business one time and he owned a boat repair shop. And his lift that he would bring the boats out of the water on, it broke in May. And he can only work in the summer, right? It snows where he lives in the winter. So he was like, I don't care what it costs. I want it today. And that made sense for the type of business he was in. So you just have to think about your own needs and be open-minded and flexible.
Has the cost of borrowing gone up or gone down since the pandemic?
Well, so one thing I would say is sometimes what we hear from borrowers is they in their mind have like the mortgage rate world, and that's what they think they're going to get in rate. Business lending is very different than that. Rates are going to be significantly higher because there's a lot more risk to the lender that a business might file bankruptcy or walk away from their debt. So I don't think that pricing is significantly higher after the pandemic. There are certainly products that are going to be more expensive. And when you're thinking about pricing in small business lending, don't tie yourself to consumer rates because you're really unlikely to find any comparables there.
What should they be thinking about? Is it in like the low teens or even higher than that?
It can really depend on the product and who you're working with. What I would say is when you're looking at the price, make sure you ask for rate and APR. APR is going to tell you, including all the fees, what you're really paying. At Funding Circle, we're signed on to the Small Business Borrower Bill of Rights. You can look it up online, but it's a whole group of lenders who are really working hard to provide transparency in the credit market and make sure small business isn't regulated like consumer. So it's easy for someone to say you're getting a price or a rate and not really tell you the full story. So I would encourage borrowers to really look at the Small Business Borrower Bill of Rights.
Great. And speaking of that Bill of Rights, what does it include in, is it industry-wide, all lenders, or special lenders following it?
Yeah, it's not industry-wide, but many lenders have signed on. So Funding Circle is signed on, for example, Opportunity Fund, Lending Club, a lot of us online lenders who know that our market isn't very well regulated, but want to encourage people to look for transparency and make sure that people don't get taken advantage of.
Great. So one more on that front. Why isn't it regulated like the consumer lending market? Why is it kind of wild, wild west?
I mean, I think that's just a product of regulation. Most small business lending regulation comes state to state. So for example, getting a small business loan in Nevada and what's required there is very different than what's required in New York, for example. And that's not only challenging for borrowers, it's actually quite challenging for lenders too, because we need to comply with rules in every single state. There's also products out there that don't consider themselves small business loans. So they don't think of themselves as a lender. They're maybe giving you advances on your receivables or something like that. But at the end of the day, any of those might be good for a borrower as long as you really understand what you're signing up for. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's easy for us that do this all day to just spout off a whole bunch of words and think, oh yeah, you know what we're talking about, but it's okay if you don't. Take the time to ask questions and understand. If you're working with a reputable lender, they're going to be comfortable answering those questions and making sure you truly understand what you're getting yourself into.
Excellent. So if you're one of the tons of small business owners that were struggling through the pandemic, you got the PPP, you're starting to turn the corner now, PPP's over. Are you shut out of the lending market because you might have been struggling?
Not always. I would say if you in the pandemic struggled, I would encourage you to be flexible about what you're asking for. Maybe in your mind you said, I need a line of credit for $100,000. You might only get approved for a line of credit for $50,000. And maybe that isn't going to get you through the next 2 years, but that can help you kind of build back up over the next 6 months. And that's okay. As long as you're not paying any big prepayment penalties or anything like that, that might be enough to just kind of get things going again. Also, a lot of lenders have adjusted their credit criteria to ensure that they're not too negatively penalizing someone for something that really was outside of their control. I would encourage you to really look at your personal credit and any other guarantors or part owners of the business, because it's normal, even pre-pandemic, that business lenders are going to really rely on that personal credit data to make a decision on the loan.
Great. Alternative lenders or online lenders have been stepping up and playing a bigger role in lending small business owners money. Why are they willing to when the banks aren't?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about your regular bank, they offer a myriad of services. They've got checking accounts, deposits, CDs, savings accounts, all these things. And one part of their business is small business lending. Online lenders, we tend to be specializers. So we'll have one or two things we really do well. At Funding Circle, we're a marketplace. So we help people find a small business loan, sometimes with us, sometimes with someone else, but that's all we do. So we're really able to focus on our core product and make sure we're offering borrowers that experience. And I think that's something in the market you're going to continue to see, is that specialization. By focusing on one thing, we can, make that cup of soup perfect versus, the whole buffet.
Given you guys are a marketplace, what are small businesses borrowing money for? Is it equipment? Is it to hire staff? What are you guys seeing the demand in terms of loans?
We're seeing all of that. We're seeing borrowers who just need working capital. Like you said, maybe they're a restaurant, they're adding some new staff, they need to, redo their furniture or something like that. So we're seeing stuff like that. That's probably the most common, is like a working capital product.
Great. So if you're a small business owner and you're looking for funding, what are your top tips? How do they get the best rate, the most amount, and the quickest loan?
Yeah. I would say, first of all, be very realistic about what you need. Understand that, maybe you're only going to have a short-term product, and that's okay. Really ask around, talk to a lot of people, research online, be open to new ideas, because there are a lot of great new lenders out there. Again, focus on those 3 C's before you apply: cash flow, credit, character. Make sure your personal credit and your business are in the best possible spot they can be. Make sure your bank accounts are tidy, under control, not a lot of overdrafts, things like that. and make sure that your online presence is strong, as well as any kind of required documentation in your state or city.
Great. Well, this was awesome. I want to thank you so much for taking out the time today. This is really
No problem,
helpful.
Donna. Well, thank you so much. Have a good day.